Hi everyone, I'm Steve here as usual, our once a week interview with Dr. Nario. Dr. Nario, as you know, is at Biointegrative Health Center in Reno, Nevada. You can check them out online and see all the different treatments they do and what they're all about. So thanks for being with us, Doctor.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for having me again. Always a pleasure.
So, I listen to a lot of doctors, a lot of opinions, and you hear such varying opinions. And I've always heard that Um, if you want to, um, it's healthy or it's preventative to take a baby aspirin um, every day. So we're going to talk about aspirin today and some of the new findings that you've discovered through some new studies and some of the things that you've been to. So first, tell us, what is aspirin?
Well, Steve, aspirin is one of our more available, commercially accessible remedies, right? And let me tell you a little bit history about it. Aspirin started in 1897. That's how long this thing has been going on, and was found by the German chemist named Felix Hoffmann. And in relation to that, he was working with Bayer. Now, as you know, the one who carries the most famous aspirin, right? So he was playing around with the chemicals, and he actually is adding acetyl groups in specific herbs. And this is and there's this what we call salicylic acid that he encountered and mixed it with these compounds. Thus, he found, specifically in 1899, found aspirin. So the name itself is A is acetylation. Spirin is actually a meadowsweet plant that actually contains the salicylates. So it's Spirea ulmaria. And now, as you combine both, now Bayer brought it out to the market as a powder. And aspirin, as we know, is an analgesic medication that can be given in different doses and forms. So this is where we find the dynamic capabilities of aspirin. At baby, as we call it, 75 to 81 milligrams, it's used to prevent clotting. And for intermediate dosing at 650 milligrams to 4 grams, it's now an analgesic and antipyretic. So when we are sick or we have the flu, that's the dose that we should be taking. And at very high doses, at 4 to 8 grams, it's a potent anti-inflammatory. Right? So we don't go that far with that, but it helps with the muscle aches, muscle pains. Common side effects that people think about aspirin is, of course, the platelets. They get stuck together. So thus they form a thinner blood, and thus helping you prevent heart attacks and strokes. The downside with this is bleeding problems and more bruising. And another one is when you take NSAIDs, it's almost similar to what the side effects are. It can also produce stomach ulcers and bleeding. So over time, levels of prostaglandins in the stomach can actually be weakened. Thus, now the problems with aspirin.
So aspirin kind of started off, going back to the 1800s, it kind of started off as like pain relief, right? I mean, you you got a headache or something, pain, and you would use an aspirin. But is that what it's usually known for? Is that what it started off to be known for, or what would you say there?
Yeah, so it actually is. That's how Bayer actually got their ball rolling for them. It's really more for fever, aches, pains. The studies about blood thinning was never really there until it went forward. So that was the initial purpose of aspirin.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So what about is there any other, you know, lesser known benefits or things that we should know about aspirin? Because I've heard so many different things from so many different doctors, and it's funny, whether it's diet or whatever, a lot of doctors that I respect, a lot of times they'll disagree. So tell us a little more about aspirin, maybe benefits or maybe potential side effects, because you never really hear about potential side effects. So um, tell us a little more about, are there other known benefits or side effects that, once we started to learn about, okay, it's a painkiller, but what came next?
Well, Steve, really, what really came next is the one that I think you were pertaining to. that what are the other functions of aspirin other than being an anti-inflammatory. So now it's being used a lot by people who has cardiovascular problems because, as I just mentioned to you, it prevents clots from forming, thus lowering down the risk of heart attacks, strokes, and even clots in your legs by almost 30%. So the dose, usually at 75 to 300 milligrams per day, is something that you would see this effect with. And it also leads to improving blood flow. That's why preventing platelets also is something that you would see. This is why it's being taken by patients who had a stroke or a heart attack, and you would notice this effect on 10 days. So it's not going to happen on day one or day two or day three. It has to be on day 10. And also, when you compare the anti-inflammatory effects of aspirin versus ibuprofen or acetaminophen, there is really something special about the anti-inflammatory effect of aspirin for the reason that it cannot. There's an enzyme that actually it can stimulate, which was not stimulated by the other anti-inflammatories that I mentioned a while ago. That's why this is something that I want to emphasize on because now this is something. Wow, there's a lot of inflammation with this patient. That's why sometimes I think about it more than the other ones. And you mentioned about the side effects. The common side effects, as I mentioned a while ago, would be a lot of bleeding and also bruising, and also, of course, the ulcers. So this is one of the controversies wherein us clinicians discern if a patient has an existing ulcer already, should we use it? Should we not use it? If the patient has an actual a risk factor, a post-stroke, yeah, is there more benefit than harm if we use it or not? So that's where your doctor comes in and helps you out in terms of the proper use of aspirin.
So tell me about some of maybe the not so well known benefits, um, maybe some new things that aspirin could benefit. Is there anything like that?
Yes. So, Steve, with the recent findings of aspirin, now the rave of nitric oxide production is actually found when you use aspirin, which is actually low doses. And this is something that's related to stimulating the blood vessels to create it some more. Another one would be COVID-19 patients. It prevents the formation of clots. As we all know, COVID likes to create these microclots. So that's why taking aspirin, may it be even before having COVID or during COVID, lowers the mortality in these specific patients. Another one, which is dumbfounding for me, is actually lowers the risk of colorectal cancer. And this benefit can be seen as you increase the dosing of the aspirin that you take. So it actually lowers it down by 35%. And this is using on the studies at 325 milligrams per day. Not only is it stopping or holding colorectal cancer, but it also lowers down the chances of esophageal, stomach, pancreatic. And longer duration of aspirin use provides more benefit, as I mentioned a while ago. And aspirin has showed that the cancer incidence, even the possible spread, and even most importantly, survival of the cancer patient showed benefit when you're using aspirin. And also, another one, fatty liver at 81 milligrams. So you don't even have to increase the dose. It actually helps lower down the fatty liver, meaning fixing liver enzymes over a period of 6 months when you take it. So it actually lowers the inflammation also in the actual liver by looking at the liver enzymes when you do blood testing. And again, this is very safe and very well tolerated. And lastly, one thing that was really surprising for me, it actually supports the flexibility, the growth of nerves in your brain, and thus promoting the production of brain derived neurotrophic factor, promoting brain functions, promoting the lowered inflammation state of the brain so you can think better and even move yourself farther away from Alzheimer's and dementia.
Interesting. So the 81 milligrams, that's what you get in a baby aspirin, right?
That's correct. 81 milligrams is all you need. That's what I got from all these research and studies. We don't really have to go crazy on the 325 milligrams a day.
Okay, everyone, that's Dr. Nario at Biointegrative Health Center. Thanks for being with us, Doctor.
Thank you, Steve, for having me again. After, as we all know, that knowledge is power, and thank you for letting me provide you with the edge in longevity and health maintenance, which I call the biological edge or the bio edge.